What we're going to look at today is your values and how they shape the kind of crisis response you will have. We'll look at the types of crisis that it may apply to. We'll look at the platforms where most crisis management communication tends to happen. And I'll introduce you to the 3 C's, which will help you to make sure you never go wrong when you're posting stuff to social media in response to some kind of crisis. And then there's a 10-point plan, which will give you every step to take in order to ensure that you're ready for crisis communications on social media when something does go wrong. Or at least you've got some tools at your disposal that you can use to make sure that people are aware of what you're doing. First up, this is brought to you by Business Station and the Digital Solutions Platform, thanks to the Australian government. My own work has been with Business Station and the Digital Solutions Program, as well as with Meta's Boost with Facebook program, and I'm part of the Facebook Leaders Network as well. My own business is ClickStarter and Cellular One. In the case of ClickStarter, very much assisting a lot of businesses in crisis communications when they've had things go wrong with their businesses, also in government in Northern Territory and Queensland. And my other business is Cellular One and mobile and NBN reseller. So how you operate on social media is pretty much always going to be about what your values are. Excuse me while I just clear my throat. Much better. So how you operate your social media in a crisis reflecting your values is basically saying whatever your values are as a business, as an individual, as an organization, those will be reflected in how you'll respond to social media and to a crisis in those times. So you've got to think of in terms of what are the kind of values that your company or your business represents. In my case, I want mine to be authentic. I want mine to be vulnerable. I want one of my values to be that we are decisive, effective, teachable, and a little bit humble as well. Those are very important, values for my businesses, but yours might be a little bit different. For instance, if you're in a position of a business which is very old school and doesn't like to admit when it's done things wrong, and it's got a very different approach to this, where I make a mistake, I go to social media and I own that mistake. If I've messed up with a client, I get in there and say, yeah, you know, I was working with this client and I messed up and I apologize for this. And this is something we don't like to do often, but we're owning that issue and working with them to make that problem better. So that's not what often happens in companies and businesses. They make a mistake, they like to hide it, or they like to gaslight the client to make them out to be the bad guy, which is absolutely not the right way to go. You may have a slightly different response given on what the values of your organization are. So if you don't really like that vulnerability of calling yourself out when you've made a mistake, this may not be one of your values. If you're in a position where you don't want to be seen as having to be teachable, you want to be that solid rock that nobody could ever think badly of, well, then teachable is probably not one of your values to bring forward. So it's very worthwhile thinking before you do all this of what your values are as an organization. How will people know what you stand for? And how will that then be reflected in what you do when you respond to some kind of crisis on social media? Let's keep going. So what is a crisis when it relates to social media? How do we garner it as a crisis? How big does a problem have to be before we go, we need to respond to this like a crisis? Well, the simple answers are that they are natural disasters. They could be reputational crises, or they could be ones that are due to unexpected change. So industry change has come out of nowhere, regulation change has come out of nowhere, or it could be something like, the usual, cyclones, floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, disease. It's keeping our throat clear. So natural disasters are the obvious ones. If there's flood, fire, drought, storm, cyclone, tsunamis, earthquakes, disease, any of those things that cause an issue that you have absolutely zero control over, and you're part of the response to that, well, then you may find that you need to respond to that, especially if it's in your area. If you've got a flood, fire, or drought, or storms or cyclones that are happening within your region, and it affects either your business or the town around you, well, then it's very hard not to respond to that in some way. How you respond, though, is a whole other deal. Though we might look at how we respond to current mask mandates, vaccination mandates, and COVID shutouts and lockouts and lockdowns and the different kinds of changes that happen for business around that. So in that sort of case, it could be very important if there is a change to the way that people can do business with you due to lockouts, for instance, or lockdowns, then you may need to communicate that through your crisis management. Or say, for instance, if there is a particular, that people, you've had to let go of staff because of changes to vaccine mandates and you're working with the direct public, then there's a very good chance that you may have to respond to that somehow, particularly if there's starting to be words around that and people starting to say about stuff about around that outside of your initial sphere of influence, when other people are talking about your business due to how you've had to react due to mask mandates and vaccine mandates. When it comes to a reputational crisis, we're talking about when there's criminal acts in your business. Your business may have been affected by activism, may have been called out as a polluter, called out as by vegans as animal killers, or something like that. Or you might be called out for impropriety. So there's some behavior that's not acceptable by members of your team. So, for instance, football teams, particularly the NRL, are particularly plagued every single year with football players behaving badly. So those kind of things bring forth a reputational crisis that needs some kind of response. But ultimately, for most small businesses, it won't be so much your own criminal acts or impropriety or being affected by activism. It's going to be more to do with when your product or service fails in some way. So if there's some kind of non-delivery of service, or somebody is making a very big fuss about the experience they had with you, and they're making it very, very clear to a very large amount of people that you are somehow to blame for all that, then at some point you as an organization or a business have to have some kind of response to this reputational crisis that is starting to bubble over. An example would be the Crown Casino in Sydney has been unable to be opened. What they can do at the moment is operate some bars, some restaurants, that sort of thing, and the accommodation, but they're not able to open up as a casino because there was safety checks done that indicated that Crown could not be trusted when it came to issues with money laundering. So that affected them all around the world. They had massive issues in their Macau property in China, and they also have had some allegations against them in the Melbourne Crown Casino as well as investigations through the Perth Crown Casino. So there've been all sorts of struggles. They've got this huge multi-billion-dollar investment they've made in Sydney, and they can't open it. So it's been a really rough time for them based upon allegations and some licensing issues that have come up, saying they basically cannot open as a casino as yet because they cannot be trusted for one reason or another. So they've had to respond to that, and so they're working with the authorities to overcome those issues over time, so they will be able to begin trading at some point. The other one is unexpected change, and this is where things will change in your business due to economic circumstances. There might be some sort of downturn in the economy, a recession, things like that. It could be technology change. We certainly saw that when Uber came along and changed the way that we interacted with taxis. I don't think I've caught more than one taxi in the last probably 6 or 7 years because I Uber everywhere. I find it a more pleasant experience, far more pleasant than what it is through a taxi. And let's not even talk about the smell of taxis, but it's that technology change did have an impact on the taxi industry. Now, I don't think there's too many taxi drivers have lost work, but it certainly has been a change that has affected them. So the taxi industry responded in a certain way, which is to try and ban Uber. That has failed completely. In a couple of places in Australia, it might still be, but by and large, it's just failed completely. And the industry has had to respond. And one of those responses has been opening up their own apps that all sort of acts like Uber does, or cleaning up their act and making sure taxis are cleaner, run better, taxi drivers are better educated on where things are in towns, so that they could respond to that technology change and show that they are not just fighting and whinging about it now, but they're actually trying to work with that new technology. Unexpected change can come to your business in the form of new competition. So let's just say you're a fashion store for larger sizes. You've opened up in a mall, like a shopping center, and next thing you know, 3 doors down, another store has opened up, which is for exactly the same kind of exactly the same kind of fuller figure or larger sizes. So what's your response to this? Are you taking the high road of saying, hey, welcoming our neighbors plus size delights to X amount shopping mall? We really hope together we will be, serving the community with better choices for larger sized women. So that kind of tweet or that kind of social media post could be a response to a crisis, even though it's a slight crisis to you because you are uncertain of where your store is going to be able to go in the future. It isn't really a crisis in terms of like the whole town is in crisis. That said, though, new competition can bring other problems, such as if there's not enough market to go around for 2 of you, then you both may close down, and that will leave the town without choices for that kind of clothing. So how you respond to those kind of changes says a lot about the business you are. And again, that goes back to what your values are. I actually have a web page on my website that highlights who my competitors are and says what's awesome about them, because I'm not really afraid of them, not worried about them. They've never really had much of an impact on me, to be honest. I operate in a different part of the business. But for me, it's important as part of my values that I'm honest and open and transparent, that yeah, there are other people who do what I do, and you do have choices. And then the other thing is regulatory crackdowns. So this could be in areas where, for instance, probably the most obvious one is vaccine mandates that are going around at the moment, meaning that a lot of store owners are having to police people's vaccine status before they can enter their stores or businesses or cafes or restaurants. We've got that here in the Northern Territory at the moment, and to be honest, it hasn't really been much of a hassle. It just gets a hassle when it gets busy. Like we had a situation with the Noonamar Tavern where they had 300 people on the Melbourne Cup Day, and they got completely out of control, and now has become something of a potential cluster for COVID-19 after somebody came across the border and didn't declare that they'd been in Victoria within the 14 days and had COVID-19. So then other areas could be like you think about it, like cruises. There was a whole industry around cruise ships. That doesn't exist anymore in Australia. We haven't had cruise ships in Australia for quite some time. And that's where it all really began for us. COVID-19 came to this country upon the Ruby Princess in Sydney back in at the end of 2019, I believe it was. So when that happened, it was then, now the cruise industry is completely wiped out. A lot of cruise ships have been dismantled and sold for scrap. Some of the favorite cruise ships you may have been on a holiday have gone. So there've had to be some kind of crisis response to that from Carnival, P&O, and other lines like the Princess Cruises and all those, where they've had to say something about what's going on and to help, I guess, to lobby themselves to get back in the good books of the Australian government to allow them to operate again. So what do you, as a small business, get to do about these things? Well, the first thing we're going to look at is the platforms. What platforms are you going to be on when it comes time to do your crisis management, your crisis response? Where are you going to make that communication, and where are you going to monitor that communication as well? Facebook and Twitter are by far and above the most popular places to have crisis communications on. Instagram, TikTok, they're not really appropriate for that kind of communication. Facebook is much, much bigger than Twitter, but these two in combination tend to be where the news is broken, where trends start to emerge, where community news and citizen journalism seems to happen as well. Now, between Facebook and Instagram in Australia, 17.6 million people are on board it. So it is by far the most big area where people will go to communicate with friends, family, neighbors, their community through groups and business pages, all the stuff that brings people together. It is by far the biggest. And it's where most of these things happen, where grassroots communities grow up around disasters, where small groups are arranged for business owners who are trying to fight back against things like mandates, or for groups to band together in grassroots civil movements to address inequality and unjust behavior by governments and corporations and individuals as well. So it's a big location for that kind of stuff. Now, whilst that's a combined number of Facebook and Instagram, it's actually probably more close to just the Facebook amount. When you go to including Instagram, you've got about 20 million people in there. So Facebook by far and above bigger than Twitter, which is at 4.6 million. So way smaller than Facebook. But it is a place where news breaks. Journalists, politicians, community leaders, a lot of them are on Twitter because it's where news unfolds. It's where things break. It's where it's where things seem to spread more virally very early. And once it's gone from places like Twitter, then it tends to spread onto Facebook before too long as well. One of the reasons why I think politicians and government officials like to watch Twitter is because that's also where people are who like to communicate with government and government officials and with politicians and community leaders. In Australia, though, we also have 21 million people who are very regular users, like almost daily, of Google. And Google is another place where crisis communications can happen. You might go, well, how do I do that? Well, number one, it picks up, it picks up the indexing of your website and all the information. Sorry, Google, I'm not actually talking to you. That's okay. Every time I say the G word, it's like my phone starts to wake up. So that 21 million people are on there, not just looking for things to buy and things to read and things to research, they're looking for news. So the big G tends to take on news very frequently from news sites. It may re-index those news sites as much as every few minutes to get the latest stuff into the index of Google. Secondly, you as a business are able to post news yourself. So you're able to then go into to enter posts into your Google My Business profile. That's soon to be renamed, by the way. So if you start to see it soon, Google My Business is going away and it's going to be replaced by what is called your Google Business profile. So just keep an eye on that. If it does change very shortly, you should be advised by email whether that's the case, but you still can post to your Google Business profile. It allows you to post things like your COVID status. So for instance, if you are taking particular safety features during COVID, or if you are undergoing extra cleaning, whether you're open and closing at different times, your trading hours, your special trading hours, all of those can be communicated through your Google My Business profile. So whether it's an event that you've got on, or whether it's an update, or whether it's a COVID-related update, all that can be communicated through Google, which then when people are looking for businesses, they can see those status and those updates when they find you on Google Maps or in the Google search index as well. Now the 3 C's. We're absolutely motoring through this webinar. I'm not sure we're going to fill a full hour. So those of you who are bravely joined us this morning, it might be a nice short one for you. So the 3 C's that we're talking about are 3 ways to very much remember how to and how not to write when it comes to putting your crisis communications on social media. And they are credibility, clarity, and consistency. So let's have a look at what they actually mean. In credibility, we're looking at things coming from your business's official accounts rather than coming through personal accounts. Communicating as the business takes away the identification of an individual person. So an official account can be a person. If you're an influencer, you're a politician, if you're a significant person and people really know your name out there, then your official account is your name. Or it can come from a recognizable name. And I think we've seen this probably no better example than when we look at our premiers and our chief ministers. So Anastasia, Mark, and Michael from Queensland, Western Australia, and the Northern Territory being our leaders coming out in front of COVID-19 related news. So when there is a change to COVID news, when there is a difference, a change to the way we look at major news around lockdowns, closures, case numbers, it doesn't come from just some government official in the health department. It comes from the premiers and the chief ministers of the Australian states and territories, so that it's going to be Anastasia Palaszczuk, it's going to be Mark McGowan, it's going to be Michael Gunner, it's going to be, well, it used to be Gladys Berejiklian, but she's no longer around, but Dan Andrews, or it's going to be whoever is the leader of a particular area, Peter Gutwein in Tasmania, for instance. All those leaders come forward with their chief health officers to do the morning briefings when it comes to the case numbers and to the changing of status of lockouts, lockdowns, and mask mandates. So you see this in the case of Anastasia from Queensland. The corona cases are also communicated in a very, very clear, consistent, and very easy to digest way. So when you look at the case numbers between on the right, the 9th of November through to Wednesday the 10th, then up to the top to Thursday the 11th of November, we see what the process is. So we look that there's 2 cases reported today in Queensland, with one other source, active cases 16 in the whole state. So looking at that and going, okay, they've got a total of confirmed cases doing a certain amount over time, what the deaths are over time, and the tests and the vaccine and the patients recovered that have happened. And it's produced in a consistent way all the time. It's got credibility because it comes from the Premier's own account. This will also be produced in Queensland Health's account and in the Queensland Government's account as well. So it attaches these in a clear, easy to read, consistent format with the person who's presenting this on the television cameras, on the Facebook Lives, and now in the Facebook posts as well. Then we look at clarity, which is all about simple directives, plain language, nothing that's hard to understand, nothing that's hard to work with. So we look at that in terms of the Melbourne region earthquake of September, where the instructions were very clear from the government and from the local councils on where to go and where not to go. And I was saying, basically, if you don't need to be in Chapel Street in South Yarra or Paran or Windsor, stay away from those areas because there's no need for you to be there and it's quite dangerous. We're still assessing damaged buildings and making sure that things are safe so that people do not get hurt. So they had to make sure to absolutely certain whether people were going to be hurt, harmed, or in some sort of danger in the areas that were affected by the earthquake. Nothing was like that, oh, we don't really know what's going on right now. So maybe if you go down, Malvern Road and then turn into, Kooyong and then down there and Kuongku Boulevard and then go back onto the Southeast Motorway. There was nothing that was giving you an intense instructions of what to do. It's just simply saying, if you do not need to be in that area, stay away from that area until we have assessed, and we will give you more information coming up. We saw this with the amazing case of Cleo, where the Western Australian Police Force, when they found her, when they were celebrating they found her, and when they put up the messages to show that she had been found, they kept the message simple. It was simply things such as the miracle we all hope for, my name is Cleo, and the moment Cleo was rescued. It didn't go into lots of extra, thoughts and feelings and going into the emotions and the celebration and the reconnection of Cleo with her family. That all happened later on down the track. Who the person was who did this, that happened later down the track. What was important to be communicated to the people of Australia at that time wasn't who's to blame, what they did, and whether they got dolls in their bedroom. It was all simply about Cleo has been found. She said her name is Cleo. It's a miracle, and we've got her back where she needs to be. And that sort of easy news, that kind of really simple news kept us, I guess, captivated enough. Where you see this go wrong is where media, particularly, and I'm going to call out the Sunrise show on Channel 7 about this. At the time I was at my parents' place and they watched Sunrise, and watching the Koshi and the journalist who was on the ground in Western Australia covering this in trying to remember the name of the town, was Exmouth? Just completely lost it. And where the towns are, where this all happened, that they were just making stuff up. They didn't have information. So what they were doing was making it up, just filling gaps, just trying to fill 2 hours of news time with the biggest news story in the nation at the time by just making things up and speculating wildly about things. And that's how, in the end, they were then the people who miscommunicated who the suspect was. It was someone else who had that name. They started putting up Facebook stuff about someone who had nothing to do with all this. So when you start to speculate, when you start to talk too much about things you don't know about, you end up putting yourself into a lot of danger, and that could go down the path of slander and libel. It could go down to going down and causing loss of business to people. It can put you in a lot of legal trouble. So stick to the basics, keep it simple, and make sure that everything you're communicating is super, super clear. It doesn't go into lots and lots of extra detail that's absolutely unnecessary. The consistency is where you are often making statements, and then you need to acknowledge the previous statements you've made so that you've got updated information that's still related to the old information. This helps to remove any sort of confusion that's coming out. So if you're acknowledging your previous statements saying, at 5 p.m. yesterday, we stated blah, 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 blah. This morning, we now add to that information that blah, 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 blah. The consistency also comes when this news and when these updates for your organization or for your business or for yourself are delivered in the same tone, from the same account, and it's essentially the same person delivering it. Again, going back to our chief ministers, our chief health officers, and our premiers, all being the same person, except for when Dan Andrews, of course, did quite a nasty injury to himself and couldn't do his duties. Then the deputy premier was the one who came forward. It wasn't just a public health official that we do not know that came forward with the person who, to us, and for all intents and purposes, is the face of our particular state or territory governments. So we look at this in the case of acknowledging previous statements. When you go in, acknowledge that you made a statement previously about this crisis or about this situation. Now you add new information on top of what you previously had communicated. And then finally, you confirm the whole picture with the new information. So if the previous statement was that Alfred Road is closed between 6 and 9 p.m. tonight, please stay away from the area and observe all the detour signs and drive carefully. And then what happens is at 7 p.m. that the reason for the road being closed is now being removed and the street is now open again. It would be like saying, we previously stated at 4 p.m. this afternoon that Alfred Road will be closed from 5 to 9 p.m. We are pleased to announce with updated information that it will now be open again at 6 p.m. Please do drive carefully into the conditions, and for more information, go here. We confirm that Alfred Road will now be open again from 6 p.m. so that you'll be able to continue there on your regular commute home. So you're acknowledging the previous statement, you're then adding what the new information is, and then you confirm the whole picture again so that people can very easily compare what they heard before with what they're hearing now, and then you confirm it. So again, you have got that second reinforcement of the new information in the big picture. So how does that look, for instance, when we go for, say, the Northern Territory government? So the Chief Minister, Michael Gunner, was confirming that on the 7th of November, that there was something that was put out there that was not completely accurate. So on the 8th of November, it came out and said the information which we published at approximately 5 p.m. today was factually incorrect and was published in error. We apologize. And now the correct information is below. So what they've done is keep that consistency between the look and the feel of the posts. They've got a particular way that they are looking at communicating that, and it comes out in that way all the time. Always in that blue color, always within a look and feel that looks consistent with all their previous communications. And finally, acknowledging that the previous information was not factually correct and that they have new information which you can read below. Consistency means that doesn't mean that you necessarily don't own up to your mistakes. Consistency means that you actually do own up. You say, this happened, here's the new information. And then later on the 9th, they then made sure that the correct information was delivered, but also that they were able to produce a consistent graphic that ensure that people can see that this is the official word from the government, not just something which has appeared in a Facebook group or a Facebook page somewhere that's random. So now we move on to what we call the 10-point crisis plan. And this is your plan with which to attack any sort of crises that happen in your business. Remembering that we had natural disasters, we had reputational crises, and then we also had the kind of crises that can pop up with change occurring. So in any of those kind of crises, this plan will help you to do it. The first thing I want you to do is go in and review your upcoming social media posts and consider pausing them. Now, this has got to do with people who do a lot of their social media posting ahead of time. So they might do a year's worth of social posts in advance, or they might do maybe a week or two's in advance. You may find that suddenly in the midst of a crisis, it's not particularly appropriate for you to be doing a Throwback Thursday post or a It's Friday post. Those things probably not that necessary when you're trying to communicate something very, very serious at a time when you need to communicate clearly, consistently, and with credibility. These things do not sort of put that forward. When things are back to normal, by all means, turn it all back on. But just while this crisis is going, maybe stick to just the facts and just the things that need to be communicated rather than all the fun stuff. Number 2, check your social media policy. Now, if you're a small business, you probably don't have one. My small business does have one because it'd be silly if I didn't. And it has certain things in it that ensure that everybody knows what their job is when it comes to responding to a crisis in my businesses. So by checking your social media policy, it's like this place you go to, which gives you the instructions. It tells you where to go and what to do. And if you don't have one and you need to write one yourself, what your social media policy is basically going to cover is the kind of material and content that's going to be posted on your website, on your social media by the company and by representatives of it. It's going to also put out behavioral guidelines on what people are supposed to do on company social media properties. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, doesn't matter what the network is. You've got some kind of guideline that says this is the behavior that on our official channels we wish to encourage. The behavior outside of this, including putting personal agendas onto company properties, will not be tolerated. Then you go a step further into employees' own channels. We're talking about their own profiles, their own business pages, all that kind of thing. And this could be where you are, for instance, you have an employee who's a bit of a loose cannon. And that loose cannon likes to put a lot of opinions about various conspiracy theories onto their official channels. Now, it's very well known in the public that that person works for you. So what that is doing is reflecting on you and your business. Now, you might say, oh, it's free speech, free country, all that sort of thing. There's no Bill of Rights in Australia that guarantees you that you can say whatever you want on social media and get away with it. In Australia, unlike the US, we don't excuse the responsibility of the greater society just because I felt like doing something. Otherwise, we'd have the chaos that America's got, where everyone needs to have a gun. So it's what we have here, though, is precedent in the courts that can actually hold a company liable for the words spoken by its employees on social media, even on their own channels. So, for instance, if Maggie goes over and starts blasting the government for being part of a conspiracy theory to protect Big Pharma, and then the Big Pharma decides to sue them, and they'll decide to sue you as their employer, is because they are someone who is known to be working for your company and often speak for your company. Therefore, the insinuation is that because they're saying that, it's your company saying that as well. Now, it's going to be a hard thing to get that through court, I'll admit, but you don't want to be in that position in the first place. So your social media policy needs to contain something that says something like your behavior on your personal social media reflects upon your employment with us. If there are issues with your personal social media that are public and opinions that are public, people will assume that that is also the opinion of the company you work for, so that you must not do that, and it will be disciplined in your employment contract. So having that plan in place makes it clear to everybody what the expectations are for how they behave on social media. There's a particular person I'm thinking of in my region who is a business advisor who recently decided to have a bit of a rant about closing her retail store. And that sort of thing absolutely can reflect upon the government program that she's working for. So I think she's got a bit of pain coming down the pipe with that one. Not really happy to hear that, but yeah, it's one of those things where you just got to watch what people are saying because it does reflect on you. Number 3, now we're going to turn to what I call the A team. This is your people who can do remarkable things under pressure, can do remarkable jobs under pressure know how to communicate, know how to do graphics, know how to use social media, know how to proofread. Get them together. You've got one person who works around you, even if they're a friend and not necessarily an employee or a team member. It could be like your mother, who is like a stickler for details and knows how to proofread like crazy, or it could be your younger sister who knows how to do really good graphics that are clearly communicating things. Use the resources around you and call them your A team, because they're your action team, where you can go, I need this mum, I need this sister, I need this brother, I need this partner, and they'll all come together and you'll be able to get that message out the way you need it to be. Have them ready, have them known, actually identify it in your social media plan who that A team is, so you'll know it immediately when you get a problem. You go to your crisis planning and you see it in your social media strategy and plan and policies, who you go to check on things before you respond to that particular crisis. So your A team are going to be your most creative and reliable people that you know are cool-headed, people that you know are not panickers, people that you know can communicate and write clearly, concisely, and with purpose, people who you know are not just going to freak out at the slightest chance of there being a crisis, that they will come together and they'll assist you as much as they can and as quickly as possible. And then number 4, make sure everyone in your organization is on the same page. Now, this may require you to go to family members and say, hey, with regards to this, you're probably going to be asked questions from the media or asked questions from people in public about this business. Now, I need you to be on the same page as me and answer it in this particular way. And you make it very, very clear to your family members, to your employees, to the people around you, what the company line is in case of this crisis. But what you really, really need to do is ensure that not only do people know what page they're on, but you identify very early who your loose cannons are. Because every family, every organization, every group of people has their loose cannons. And in this particular case, we're talking about the people who you know cannot be trusted to say the right thing. They cannot be trusted to communicate clearly. They love to gossip, and we've got them all around us. So know who they are, so you understand when things get out and things are not said according to the company process, then you know who the likelihood of those things are going to be. Not to go out there and punish them necessarily, but just to nip it in the bud. So you go, I know this is Darren. Darren is renowned for being a gossip. I know this has gone out through him. So what we're going to do is make sure we work with Darren to ensure that if it wasn't him, that it won't be him in the future. Or if it was him, to let him know, look, we really need you to come on board with this, because it has massive ramifications for not only the business, but for employment of people in that business as well. But at the same time, you're not trying to necessarily massage the narrative or spin, like the spin doctors, they say, the PR people are trying to spin disasters into something good. We want you to be open. We want you to be honest. We want you to be human. And nobody wants you to be a robot coming in saying some robotic response. When you get to the response that's given by a company that's very obviously being guided by what the lawyers have to say. The problem is when you let the lawyers have the say of what's going to be there, it will be dry and it will be received by the public as not being genuine or authentic, and you didn't really mean it. Particularly if it's an apology. Lawyers and apologies don't go well, because they consider that an apology is admission of fault, and that will cause you to have bigger legal problems down the track. My attitude to that is, by admitting that you stuffed up doesn't necessarily say that there's fault, as long as you clarify what it is that you messed up as. That you clarify what the mistake is that you made, as opposed to saying the whole thing is your fault and nobody else's. It's completely on you. You've got to be careful with what you say. Be honest. Be open about it. Don't try to hide things. Don't try to sort of spin them around. And for goodness sake, don't gaslight your clients. That's where you're trying to convince your client, to convince the public that something you did wrong was actually someone else's fault. It wasn't your fault at all. It was this client over here, or this partner over here, or this partner business or strategic company connection you've got over there. That's when you get yourself in trouble, and people start to see that you're not authentic, you're not open, you're not honest, and you're just not being human. And we don't like it when people, especially companies and businesses and people who we assume are doing well because they've got businesses. That's a really strange one, because people just assume if you've got a business, you must be rich. we know better. That when we do that, people don't appreciate it. They don't, it seems inauthentic and it seems really, really just horrible. At the same time, by being human, if a competitor runs into trouble, what you want to do is not lay the boot in. You want to polish your boots and get behind them, support them in public and say, hey, we know that this is tough in business. And it's really sad to hear that our competitors are getting into trouble. We've offered this to be able to assist the customers or assist the competitors themselves or whatever it is you have to do just to make sure that you are polishing your own image and you're not just going out there to tarnish someone else's. Because when you tarnish someone else, you're actually tarnishing yourself. The only person that you really have a massive impact on when you decide that you're going to lay the boot into someone else is yourself. You make yourself look absolutely terrible. Number 6, only quote credible quotes and cite credible sources of information. This is a really important one because we start quoting random guys on the internet. We don't know what the background is. We may not know what the information is. At some point, we have to either trust, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, that is, you've got to trust that the official words on something is the best possible information out there that's being released for our own good. If you don't believe that and you believe there is a conspiracy in place, that's up to you. That then comes back to what your own personal and business values are. If your business values are to uncover the truth and speak truth to power and to uncover conspiracies everywhere they go, don't know what kind of business is really into that, but that might be your thing. Well, then that may be the way you act. But if you don't have something like that in your charter, if people just know you as a place where they buy really, really good skincare products, well, then they don't probably need to have some kind of connection through to information which is sketchy at best and complete misinformation at worst. They don't need that. So just quote things that are credible. Even medical situations get this wrong. So for instance, in Canada, the Stanford Hospital in Canada, I think it's in Toronto, printed details of things that could be helpful in the early days of the coronavirus. So they were saying if the virus is exposed to a temperature of 26, 27 degrees, it will be killed, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't live in hot regions, all that sort of thing. So they then very, very quickly had that shut down by people saying, this is wrong, this is misinformation. Governments came up and said, you're a hospital, we should know it's better than this. They just want to make sure, they thought it was from UNICEF and it wasn't. It was just someone doing a really bad Canva graphic and deciding to put out some disinformation or misinformation of their own. So there you go. That whole thing is just not just saying that, yes, that we quoted something wrong, but then responding to that. The response was, hey, we put out something to you that was not correct. We really apologize for that. And we'd like to thank the amazing community around us for letting us know of the mistake right away. So we want to say, yes, we provided the wrong thing. We apologize. Please ignore all the information in there because there's no reason to believe it. This is why you go to, they thought they were going through a thing through UNICEF that was sent through an email. What I would first be doing before I put that forward is go to UNICEF and ask them, did you send this? Go to their Facebook page. Is it published there? No, of course it's not. Someone just decided to put misinformation out there and they decided to put in a UNICEF logo. Now, a quick read of this will say that it will be killed and will do the trick and staying away from ice cream and cold food is advised. So none of that seems even logical. So we had to know from some point this was not from UNICEF at all. Number 7, watch and listen to what is being said on social media and the internet about you. Now, this might take a little bit of effort, particularly when you're in a position where people are saying things about you that may not be true and it may be a little bit hurtful. Now, you're in a small business, you don't really get the luxury of being precious or easily triggered by things. You have to very objectively look at what's being said so you know what to do next. If you cannot do that, if you get too scared of what people are saying, if you're far too triggered emotionally by these things, what you need to do is hand it over to someone who can more objectively read this and monitor it for you. So if you're too close to it and it hurts you too much and it gives you mental anguish about it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a natural human response to be triggered by people saying horrible things about you. But if you do have that issue, you do need to hand this over to someone else because they'll be able to sort through it all, see what the crackpots are, see what the truth is, and dig out the nuggets of gold that are in there that you can act on later on.
So there's certain software that helps you to do this, apart from just watching your Facebook page and people sort of leaving messages and all that. You can look in things like Hootsuite. Hootsuite has an excellent social media mentions suite as part of what it does. It's a paid feature of Hootsuite where you can monitor what people are saying about you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Very, very good at Twitter, actually. Not as good at some Facebook things because you can't see everything people are saying in private profiles. But it does give you an idea, and I think our LinkedIn's in there too, does give you an idea of what people are saying in a format where you can collate it all together and get an idea of what the general feeling is around you and your business and what are the things being said that you may need to address at some point to the public. Sprout Social has a version of this as well, which is also excellent, also a paid version of it. And Keyhole does have a free starter pack, but bear in mind, it only at this stage connects to Instagram and Twitter. It doesn't connect to Facebook. So you'll have limited results in there. So have a look at those if there's something you want to do to really have a look at what people are saying, what the customer sentiment is, what the comments are being made about your business out there. Even not during a crisis, this is a useful tool that helps you understand what's being said about you on social media. Now, of course, there's more to the internet than just social media. There's blogs, there's news sites, there's all that sort of stuff. So what this allows you to do in Google Alerts, so if you just go to Google and type in Google Alerts, you will find, I'm just waiting for my phone to take off again. When you go into Google Alerts, then you are able to set certain keywords or phrases that you want to be alerted to. So for instance, I've got some alerts which are around my business name. I've got alerts which are around my own name. Every morning I get those alerts sent to me at around 9 a.m. And it tells me if people are talking about me in blogs, in websites, in the news. And so I can look at that information and go, okay, here's a bunch of stuff I need to be aware of, and then I might need to act on as well. So having that information at your disposal makes a great difference because you can get ahead of things before they become too big. And also lets you know, just out of interest, who's talking about me? I'd like to know what they're saying. Number 8, please do avoid jumping on trends that have no link to what it is you do as a business. What I mean by this is probably best illustrated by influencers. Now, this is a right-wing commentator and influencer in America who lives in San Diego, who decided to hop onto the trend of helping inner city San Diego to prepare itself for potential Black Lives Matter riots that were going to happen that night. Watch what she does in this video. Oh, it's the next video, sorry.
So much.
So what this essentially was an influencer who decided that she wanted to, what we call it virtue signaling. And the virtue signaling is where you have photos taken of you and have things written about you, about the wonderful things you're doing that are so virtuous. And the reality is all she did was basically pull up, saw someone doing it, said, hey, let's get a photo showing that I'm helping out the poor people of San Diego so they don't get affected by this horrible riots going on. So she essentially had nothing to do with the riots, with the preparation for the riots. She decided to get out of her Mercedes-Benz and go and pose for a photo of her doing this particular act. She didn't do it. She didn't have anything to do with it, but she did that all the same, which is quite, I find it despicable, but that's exactly what's going on these days. If you have nothing to do with this, then don't be part of it. Don't pretend you're part of it when you're absolutely not, because you will be caught and people will call you out and your reputation will be shattered. Like, for instance, when the Malibu fires were happening in California, we saw the birth of the influencer thirst trap. And this virtue signaling version is even more insidious. There's a picture of a naked, muscular man who's looking all very sad and all very bad. And while he's standing on the beach, nowhere near the Malibu fires, and saying, this is my mood, seeing all the unreal destruction in Malibu from the fire. And we call it a thirst trap because it's like, making people go, oh my God, I'm so thirsty for that hot guy or that hot girl. And it's just basically, it's just an excuse for someone to take a hot photo of themselves. Like, for instance, hashtag Pray for Malibu has got someone in activewear showing their butt. Pray for California has got someone wearing a short skirt in the breeze and is going, look how cute I look. And then in another case where you've got, hashtag California, hashtag Malibu, hashtag SoCal, hashtag pray, and say my heart is with them in Malibu, is a chance for you to show off your abs and your great gym body. Like this is virtue signaling that goes to a point where it's just a failure. So when you're trying to do something which wants to support a cause or wants to bring some sort of attention to a cause, don't turn it into an ad for yourself. Make it about the cause. Make it about the disaster that's going on. But don't make it into something that's about you. It's not about you. It's about the situation that's happening. Otherwise, you get caught in those mistakes where people will call you out and your name will forever be dirt. Number 9, leave room for questions and own up to your mistakes. This is shown in a particular example of, now, we weren't the only country in the world that had the toilet paper riots happening. It happened in America as well. And this particular person on Twitter had posted a picture of some price gouging for a particular packs of toilet paper that were being sold in America at Shoppers Drug Mart, but kind of like a bit like our Chemist Warehouse here in Australia. So he's saying, hey, are you going to address this blatant robbery of the public or not? So whilst the company wasn't quite sure what was going on and didn't quite know where it was happening, they said, look, can you please send us a direct message with the barcode number of the toilet paper? We'll look into it for you. They didn't ignore it. They didn't try to gaslight him. They didn't try to say, here's our official company position on this. They just said simply that, hey, can you just send us a DM? We'll look into it for you because, obviously I know it's not right and they want to address this situation for him. They're not trying to block it. They're not trying to cover it up. They're not trying to sue people for posting the photo of overpriced toilet paper. All they're trying to do is say, we're not sure what's going on right now. Can you do this for us so we can work it out? So that sort of response was an ideal response. They didn't start to apologize because they don't know whether anyone actually did that in that store or whether it was someone in the public that did that. But all they know is that someone's reporting a problem with pricing of toilet paper during a crisis where there was no toilet paper available, and they need to address that. They're not admitting the fault. They're not doing anything like that just now. They're simply saying, yep, no worries, we'll look into this for you. And finally, at number 10, it's very important not to go silent or just disappear from sight when something is said about you, which is rather scandalous. Just like putting up your Throwback Thursday post in the middle of a crisis is inappropriate, neither is going silent or suddenly disappearing from sight and removing your profiles. When you do that, you may as well be admitting guilt, because when you do come back after it, people will remember. I know the media has a short memory, but people do not. People will remember that in the middle of a crisis, you disappeared. When people are asking very big questions of you and of your business, you disappeared and went somewhere else. So where can you go to get a hand with all this? Where can you go to get some help with it, some advice, some examples of how to respond better? 2 of these networks, particularly Facebook and Twitter, have excellent resources. Facebook has what they call their crisis response and safety check resources, where they can take you to where there is a particular kind of stuff which you can look at, which is to do with how to respond, what tools Facebook has that help you to respond. So that particular address, facebook.com/about/crisis response, is where you're going to find that. Or just Google Facebook crisis response, and that will take you to that page. Secondly, you've got Twitter, who has their own excellent sources on how to create a social media crisis management plan. It couldn't be more posted out there for you. That is a very, very long URL. So just go to Google and type in Twitter social media crisis, and you will find that on Google. It's an excellent, excellent guide. I think it's even better than Facebook guides, really, because this is just a flat out guide on how to create that crisis management plan. So you can go to social media confidently with the right words, the right mood, and the right tools to communicate to the public and to your customers and to the people who are around you affected by whatever it is you did, the world did, the COVID did, the earthquake did, the floods and the fires did. You've got that information at hand. And the other thing, of course, is the Digital Solutions program. So if you're part of that program, welcome aboard. I hope you're enjoying it and getting some great advice along the way. If you're not, I encourage you to join it at businessstation.com.au. For $44, you'll have 3 hours of one-to-one advisory, which will be done in 3 1-hour sessions. So those 3 1-hour sessions are then followed up by your access to 4 hours of workshops and webinars, just like this one. Quick little trick, you don't have to just do 4 hours. You can do as many hours as you like on this program of the workshops and webinars. So you get to have 3 hours of myself or any of my amazing colleagues in Business Station who can help you out with that, all for $44. If you'd like to know more about it, businessstation.com.au, or go along to my own LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram, or reach out and email me, dante@clickstarter.com.au. I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and I really hope you got something out of this, because after all, a good crisis communication plan is being a good human and a good business owner. And I do hope to see you in the next one of these webinars, and I've got tons of them coming up this month.